evening and welcome to the new episode from Apostle for Jesus English Edition. Today we will have a good and important topic which we talk about the Orthodox educational moment. And today we have a guest who is Dr. John Reynolds. He will join us and we will talk about the Orthodox education and the Christian education and everything we need to know about this subject. Also join us today from the studio, Karam and Dr. Adnan. Welcome, and Karam, you can take the call.
I just want to share a few words with you. The Bible speaks of the moral and spiritual instructions of believers in general. It places a high value upon knowledge, both of God and His works. His works make me always thinking about the creation, His creation, how He created everything. And I always remember the words in the Psalm, how many are your works, Lord? In wisdom you made them all. The choice you make for your children's education shapes them academically, spiritually, and in their worldview and skills. St. Constantine School and College take seriously the responsibility to develop children's mind, but they don't distance God from academics. This is very important, dear our beloved listeners. They know that developing skills in young people is essential to helping them reach their God-given potential. Thank you for listening to me. Yes, Dr. Adnan.
Good evening, everyone, and we would like to welcome you to this special episode with a special guest and the speaker. As you know, that schools or school education plays an important role in our life, and that is very important after the education the Christian receives at his household mainly by his mother, who is called by several fathers as the primary priest, and the priest will be the secondary priest. And today we have a special speaker who is Dr. John Mark Reynolds, who is the president of the St. Constantine Orthodox School, and which is a kindergarten through college program in Houston, Texas. Dr. John Mark Reynolds is a fellow also of the Center for Science and Culture at the Discovery Institute and the former provost of Houston Baptist University. He was the founder and director of the Torrey Honors Institute, the Socratic Great Book Centered Honors Program at Biola University. He received his PhD in philosophy from the University of Rochester, where he wrote his dissertation analyzing cosmology and psychology in Plato's Timaeus. Dr. Reynolds is the author also of numerous books, including When Athens Met Jerusalem, an introduction to classical and Christian thought, and is the editor of the Great Books Reader. He is a frequent blogger and lecturer on a wide range of topics, including ancient philosophy, classical and home education, politics, faith, and virtue. John Mark attends St. Paul Orthodox Church in Katy, Texas, with his parents, brother, wife, and children. He is an avid technophile. The lights, the speakers, and the computers in his house can be all controlled by his cell phone, to both cool and disastrous effect. He loves Disneyland, Star Trek, and the Green Bay Packers. John Mark and his wife Hope have 4 homeschool graduate children: LD, Mary Kate, Ian, and Jane. So without further ado, we would like to welcome Dr. John Mark Reynolds.
Well, it's a really great honor to be here. This is really, I think, the Orthodox moment for education. This is the time that, having created education as we know it in the past, and having sustained classical education for centuries with almost no help, this is the time for the Orthodox to come back to the fore and seize leadership to help renew the classical education that we created in many ways hundreds of years ago, beginning with figures like St. Basil. So it's exciting to be here and to talk to you and to the people watching our discussion.
Thank you, Doctor. So let's start with what is the Orthodox education? What is the purpose and what is the idea and what is the goal?
Well, if we think about, imagine getting it wrong and taking one half of reality and not thinking about it. That kind of education where you learned everything there was to know about half of reality, but ignored the other half of reality, would lead to a disaster. You'd end up destroying yourself, harming yourself in a culture. And unfortunately, cultures, unlike video games, if you've ever played a video game, you know that as you play the video game, you get a save game feature often. You can save the game, you can try something out, and if it doesn't work, you can go back and try something else. You can undo your mistake. But in a civilization, you don't get a save game feature. If you make a disastrous mistake, if you do education badly, if you ignore half of reality, you don't get to go backwards and fix everything. It leads to a cultural disaster, and cultural disasters harm people, real people. So what is it to miss half of reality? I think of it this way. When we go to school, we know we need to learn about physics, the physical world, the world of matter and energy. But then there's also the world of mind, the world of ideas, the world of mathematics, the world of numbers, and the world of the spirit, of the great mind, the greatest mind being God, the creator God. If we ignore the metaphysical reality, then we cease to be able to understand the meaning and the purpose behind physical reality. If we end up with a bad metaphysics, we cannot long keep even science going. And so we can see a kind of decay into either decadence or some kind of ugliness when we lack both physics and metaphysics. And of course, the Orthodox Church, because of the incarnation of Jesus Christ, who is both fully God and fully man, united without confusion, by its very nature, the Orthodox Church must proclaim both physical reality. The Word became flesh, and so we helped create modern science because science is good to study. The Word became flesh. And so unlike other civilizations and cultures that looked down on matter and only wanted to think about the metaphysical world, God honored nature by clothing himself in nature, becoming man. And so physics counts. We're able to do science, but then we also have an adequate metaphysics. We have an adequate understanding of the meaning and purpose of science. And so this kind of full education keeps us from destroying ourselves as individuals by missing half of reality or misunderstanding half of reality. And it also, thank God, enables us to preserve civilization, as the church did, as the Orthodox Church did for hundreds of years. We preserved the best of pagan literature. Plato, I did my PhD at a secular university on Plato. If it weren't for the Orthodox Church, there would be no manuscripts of Plato to look at. We preserved them for hundreds of years, almost by ourselves, because we understood that there was wisdom there, that there were things to learn, as St. Basil would have pointed out, but they were wisdom within the context of the church. And so this kind of education needs to be revivified, be restored, and hopefully a program like the St. Constantine School in Houston for K through 12 for children, and then for college students, undergraduate college students who remain with us or come to us, becomes a part of doing that globally. So you ask a philosopher a short question and you get a very long answer. So if there are questions about that a lot of words there, so I'm
Yeah, we
happy
have
to
to.
answer.
It's a little bit like more deep because here, like we live in Michigan, and we never hear like about there is any Orthodox school here. For me, I never heard about this, so it was like something new for me to hear like, oh, there is an Orthodox school, and we were thinking like, why we don't have these schools here in Michigan, other states, because we have to represent the best quality education plus, as you said, like plus not only the education, but also principles and also the way of life for the student, that they know how to live their life in the real and in real faith, and also in the correct way to how to act with other students, how to act with other people in the real
Yes.
world, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to paraphrase Jesus at great risk, what does it profit a student to know, everything there is to know about the natural world, but to lose his own soul? What does it profit us to get the highest SAT scores, the highest college entrance exams, and lose our soul to become terrible people? And what we see often is that when civilizations go bad, it's often the brightest and the best, the so-called educated, or the credentialed, who bring in the lies, the deceptions that end up destroying the civilization. So the wonderful thing about being Orthodox is we're for reason, we're for knowledge, we're for study, but we're for study in the context of wisdom, of the higher wisdom of the heart and the enlightened mind by the power of the Holy Spirit. This is why we didn't have to be afraid of pagan culture. Pagan culture was afraid of us. They knew that we had an understanding that they lacked. And so we were able to, when we became dominant under people like St. Constantine, we were able to create the modern university system. And I would say in a place like Michigan, it's time for there to be St. Constantine schools. It's time to spread this message that the Orthodox, we don't have to wait to be educated by everyone else. But we can step forward and begin to give this full vision of reality, body, heart, mind, and then action in the real world, the worship that we bring to God.
Thank you. Tom,
Thank you, Dr. John. I have a question. Let's our audience now understand what's the school you have. Like, is it a religious school, or they are sending their kids to to learn about science and religion? Or tell us like a little bit more about the school.
Well, first of all, the wonderful thing about being Orthodox is, if you'll let me borrow an image, the eagle on my tie, the symbol of the school, has two heads. We don't try to reduce reality to one head. And I think some of our Western friends are always trying to figure out church or state, religion or science. And they can't understand that the eagle has two heads. It looks both ways in one body. And so we're not a church. The St. Constantine School is an Orthodox school, but we're not a church. We're not under a parish. We're not a parish school, because the Orthodox traditionally, under the empire in the East, had what we would call secular schools, in the sense that Orthodox people ran them. They were full of Orthodox people, but they weren't controlled by the local church. So we're not Sunday school, we're not catechism, though we teach religion and we teach theological knowledge. We also teach science and math, because we're preparing people to live in the world as it is, the physical world and the metaphysical world. And we are encouraging them then to go to church, to keep the feasts of the church. We do have morning prayers every morning at the beginning of our day, and sometimes local priests come and we celebrate the divine mysteries, the liturgy. But we don't replace the church. We are, if you will, restoring the old full version of Orthodoxy, where the village had a school, it had a church, it might have had a hospital, it might have had a hotel, really under someone like St. Basil, providing hospitality, and a monastery producing priests and producing profound theological knowledge. And you'll notice that in Lebanon, this is the exact model that's followed. The university, like the well-known and wonderful University of Balaman, is both related to the church, but not just the church, right? Just under the church. And so it can pursue all kinds of knowledge, all kinds of learning. And this is the model we get from St. Basil, who in a famous sermon, of course, encouraged young men to learn virtue from even the great pagan Homer, to take a look at Homer's Iliad and Odyssey and those great poems and learn virtue from those streams of virtue, and then add to that the great teachings of the faith that they learned in the liturgy. So the wonderful thing about being Orthodox is we don't have to have one head to our ego. We don't have to have one thing controlling us. It's really wonderful. This week I was able to talk to and again receive a blessing from Metropolitan Joseph, who's so encouraged by our school and by the advance of Orthodox schools and education. And so in conjunction, in partnership, we as Orthodox lay people can provide education just as we've always done in a healthy Orthodox society with the church without being a parish school simultaneously. There's no confusion. Sunday school on Sunday, Orthodox Monday school on Monday.
Dr. Adnan.
Well, thank you very much. I'm enjoying listening, actually. I have one or two questions. I don't want to intervene when it is a little bit not related directly to the context that has been spoken. One of the questions I have, Dr. Reynolds, about homeschooling. And
Yes.
I know many people who consider them conservative, whether Orthodox or non-Orthodox. They prefer homeschooling to actual school. This is an idea I'm not in favor of, but I would like you, as an expert, to give us your opinion about about this concept. What do you think about it?
When my children were very small, we weren't near an Orthodox school, and we weren't near a Christian school that taught the way we wanted our children to be taught. And I was lucky enough to be next to a university and work at a university and to be able to start programs to help support my children and then work with my wife and university students to help educate my own children. So I'd like to suggest that many people are in many different situations all over the world, and we could think of homeschooling as an alternative for people who don't have options, that can't get to an Orthodox school, who can't get to a satisfactory school, or where schools have been seized by an anti-Christian ideology. I fear that sometimes we can't think that if we send our kid to Monday through Friday school, where what they're taught is antithetical, that is just opposed to the Christian faith, that a priest on Sunday morning in a sermon, and then a poor Sunday school teacher, with 25 minutes or however long they get in Sunday school, can provide all the answers that people need. So particularly if someone lives in an area where the government schools have become unsatisfactory, they've become hostile to Christianity. And that's not true everywhere. That's not true everywhere in Texas. And so that can be a good choice for people. But then we can also start Orthodox day schools, and we need more of those. So that people who can't educate their own children can do that. Because though we were able to educate our children, and I have many friends and I've taught many students whose parents and the community did a good job in a homeschooling context, not everyone can do that. We saw during the pandemic when everyone was forced home and people were having to do school online, that not everyone is equipped to do homeschooling. Just sending kids home, after all, during the pandemic wasn't homeschooling. It was just forced on people. Not everyone has the time, the knowledge, or the ability to do that. And so I think many options for many people are good. I would like to think that the ideal circumstance is for parents to join together with good teachers, just like we do at the college level. And at St. Constantine, we have priests and other people who will send their college students or adults who will choose to come to our school, and we will serve the church by educating them in ways that parents or local priests might not be able to do. My PhD in biology from Rice knows a lot more about science than I do. So thank God that she's taking care of the biology class this fall and I'm not. And so I think as much as possible, we need to start Orthodox day schools at the lower levels, and then Orthodox college programs, or at least college supplemental materials for students that go to secular schools, so that they can get the kind of education they need. It's a really good question. And I think the thought that one size fits all, or that there's one answer for everyone, is a mistake. There are people that homeschool that shouldn't homeschool because they don't have the aptitude. And there are people that need to homeschool because they care more about the souls of their children than they do anything else, and there aren't any satisfactory options around them. I mean, some Christian schools, so-called Christian schools, are from religious groups that are very, very hostile to the Orthodox. I will make a joke in a sense, but someone asked why we started the St. Constantine School in college, and it was so that I believed there should be one place that got the date of Pascha right and correct for children and for college students. But, getting to more serious things in some ways, we always have to remember that whenever we are getting our primary education from mentors and other figures who aren't Orthodox, that's a dangerous situation. Now, it's not a dangerous situation we should avoid, see St. Basil again, but it's one that we should supplement and we should go at with caution. So no one size fits all. Let's have more support for parents, more support for students, so that they can get the kind of education they need to thrive both in their hearts, theologically, and mentally, socially, and in every other way.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much.
Doctor, what's the difference? Like, I know that this school is not only for Orthodox people. Like, anybody can join the school, like from different backgrounds. But
we have atheist parents who send their kids to our school, who choose because of the high academic quality.
Good. Now, if we compare the St. Constantine school, the Orthodox school, with other religious school, like Catholic school or other Christian schools, and the education level and the principles level too. It's not only education; it's principles and manner levels. So how you compare this? I'm sure you did a study before you go through this. So
right.
How you make this comparison?
Well, in some ways, we're very much like other schools. After all, when Christians helped develop modern science and modern scientific methods, other people were able to pick up those methods and use them. In the same way, when you teach calculus, you end up teaching calculus. So when we do math, we happen to use, in 6th grade, for example, Singapore math. And so our math teachers would look a lot like math teachers someplace else. We would look a lot like a Christian school and not so much like a secular school, in the sense that we think each student is a soul created in the image of God, and so has dignity and worth that's inherent to them. We also believe in Christian ethics. It doesn't mean we always practice them well, but we believe in Christian ethics, and we try to live by them and impart them to young adults and to children. And so that would be a difference that we would have in common with many Christian schools. I mean, many Christian schools would agree with us because, after all, they have received in one form or another the teaching of the church, even if they've moved away, even if they have become fragmented and broken. And so, in some ways, we're very much like a fine private school or a fine public school in what we teach and our methodology. But at a deeper level, we're nothing like these schools because Orthodoxy itself invented a dialectical form of education that begins in Socratic, and I would call it Christological questioning, the kind of questioning you see Jesus doing with his disciples on the road to Emmaus, where Jesus is walking with his disciples who are very disappointed because they think he's dead and that the Messiah that they thought was coming hasn't come. And so they're sad. Now, we would all be tempted, because we're not the Son of God with great wisdom, to appear and answer all their questions and not have our students feel a moment's doubt. But Jesus hid himself from them and so engaged in discussion with them, even asked them, "Why are you sad?" as if he didn't know, and allowed them to discuss their mistake that, we thought that this was the coming of the Messiah and we were wrong and Jesus is dead. And so they dialogue back and forth on the road to Emmaus. And of course, eventually, they see Jesus in the breaking of the bread, as something that we can experience when we see the true light each Sunday in the liturgy. And so that's a wonderful image, I think, of both secular education at the deepest level, this method where we will allow students in the context of school to express anything they think, including wrong ideas, maybe even wrong ideas about God, and listen to them and then break forth, begin to discuss the true teachings. When I was a little boy, what frustrated me about that story of Jesus educating his disciples and walking with them to the road was that the gospel writer tells us that Jesus unfolded the Old Testament and showed, I believe the expression is why the Son of God had to be killed and how he had to be revealed. And that's the part that the gospel writer doesn't tell us. I wish he had written down, what is all the teaching that they heard? Somebody asked Cleopas, St. Cleopas, to write it all down. I want to know what it is. And I was reminded, even by my own father, who is a profound educator, who just turned 84, and he said to me, no, you have to walk with Jesus on the road to Emmaus. You have to stand at the altar and see the true light in the breaking of the bread. This is something you have to experience. And so what's different about Orthodox education? I want to say this as strongly as I can. This deep dialectical investigation that is at the heart of modern science and is really the root of philosophy, when you go back to Socrates, was perfected and made whole within the Orthodox Church, within the East, within the great church fathers, as we brought forth classical education as the world knows it, as a place like Oxford and Cambridge practiced it for hundreds of years. And so when we do this education, we're in some ways being totally true to ourselves. We're not lying about anything. We're not hiding anything. We're being true to ourselves. After all, if you don't know goodness, truth, and beauty, and you begin to ask difficult questions, the danger is that society will collapse. It will just go into a kind of nihilism, a kind of emptiness, a kind of brokenness. But Christians, because we have seen God, and we know that God is real and the creator and is wise and true and good, we can venture forth in faith. We can be unsure. We can ask our hardest questions in Monday school. We can wrestle with our doubts. We can wrestle with our emotions and our feelings because we know God is good and will secure our future. And so I think that's the real addition that Orthodoxy brings. This classical education that we help perfect is true to who we are. And so I'd like to think we do it better than anyone in the world.
Great, great. There is a question related to this one. I don't know if I have to ask this question, but everybody think like these schools, the Christian schools, which is very good. Like my wife asked me from time to time, oh, why don't you take my kids in a public school? Why don't you take them to a Catholic school, to whatever, like Christian school? So the idea is it's a cost. Are these schools made for rich people only? Are these schools made for people they have money? They are, they are getting like hundreds of thousands of dollars every year, so they can send their kids to these schools. Because if somebody has 3 kids and send it to a Christian school or an Orthodox school or Catholic school, whatever these schools are, it's cost a fortune.
That's very true. And of course, government schools cost a fortune too, but we just all have to pay for it, whether we use them or not, right? So everybody is paying tuition to government schools. So I understand that. I mean, if you're already paying, a Christian school is asking you to pay twice, right? Caesar is taking away your money and using it at a school, so you might as well use the school if you can. And I think there's some sense to that. As I said to start with, some people live in areas where the government schools may be acceptable. There are countries in the world where the government school itself may have an Orthodox imprint. There are places in the United States where the Christian population dominates the government schools, and they have a Christian friendliness, or at least aren't contrary to the teachings of the church, and so are friendly. And that can be a good situation. However, at St. Constantine, we've tried to make a commitment to turn away no one for inability to pay. So in many ways, our schools are more diverse than the local government schools, because I'll point out that the government schools themselves are very segregated by wealth, since they're segregated by neighborhoods. I live in a neighborhood where the average family income in the 5-mile radius is $22,000 a year. That's not very much money in the United States. And there are neighborhoods not 10 miles from me where the average income is some of the highest in the United States. Now, you don't have to guess that the local government schools in a 10-mile radius of my house are very poor and very poorly funded. They're not very good schools. On the other hand, 10 miles from here, your local public school may have a planetarium, connected to the school, very elaborate equipment, very excellent. At the St. Constantine School, we pull from families who make almost no money, and very generous people help scholarship those students, and we scholarship them inside the school. And we have parents who make a lot of money, who could. We had parents who transferred to the St. Constantine School from private schools in Houston that charge $30-some thousand a year for K through 12 education, for K through 8 education. We don't charge that. We charge as little as we can, and we try to base it on a family's ability to pay. But you're right. A problem I think that we have in the United States, at least in some states, there are states like West Virginia, where families can carry their money with them to private schools. These are new laws that have been passed in a place like West Virginia. But in a lot of places, you're right, people are making a double choice. And so we're going to have to stop and ask ourselves, what can we afford? What can we afford not to do? And do we want to see a second or third generation in our church? After all, often we'll build a very large temple and we'll expand that temple, but we know that the next generation doesn't necessarily come to church. And a real correlative of that is a secularization that occurs through education. And so whether it's supplementing public schools with after-school programs, like we used to do with language, and some churches still do with language, like to preserve Arabic or to preserve Greek, we could do supplemental programs to help encourage people to think Christianly in areas where a Christian school isn't possible. Some will homeschool. In some places, we can press for charter schools that are compatible with the faith, where our tax money can be used. But other places, we're going to have to step up. The Orthodox in the United States are not poor, taken as an aggregate. If we wanted to support a school system like our Catholic friends have done, we could do so. But my suggestion is that many private schools have gone awry because they've ceased to serve the full community and begun to only serve the wealthy. And I understand why that's true, because obviously if I charged a lot more tuition, I would have many fewer heartaches and headaches when it comes time to balance the budget. But we're going to have to find that balance. So you ask a short question, and again, I've given you a long answer. But I think we're going to have many, many answers. But I do think we have to remember that public schools themselves, the government schools themselves, are segregated in a very dangerous way. Where my home state is West Virginia. And for hundreds of years, my family came to the United States about 1627, something like that, to Virginia. No high school, no higher education was provided for anyone in my family for 400 years. Western Virginia and West Virginia were not given the same academic access and opportunities that other parts of the state were given that were wealthier. And that's still true in many of our government schools. And the Orthodox, we need to help solve that problem because we're in some ways deciding for some students, no matter how bright you are, we're going to send you to inferior schools. And so we can actually do well by doing good. If we begin to serve a broader community and begin to help lift kids out of horrible schools, while also helping kids that maybe would have gone to good schools anyway, but help them develop better Christian character, then I think that we're really serving a good function for the society. I think it's one reason many Orthodox people support the school, but also many non-Orthodox people support the St. Constantine School, because they come here and we look like the city of Houston. We don't look like a bunch of rich kids, you know. It's not Hogwarts for Orthodox people.
Doctor, do you think if like the school get a support from the government in some areas can solve this problem? Like I know there will be some giving for the government needs, you know, because they will ask you not to do this and do that. But then that will balance a little bit, like will make the tuition less and will make more people or more students can join the school?
I get asked this question a lot, and let me say, I'm going to give you an answer, but I'm not going to answer for the St. Constantine School, because it may be a little bit of a political question. I don't think it's purely political, but I'll say what I think about this. I would not want to take money from the government directly as a school, because I want to be a Christian school, and I think there's a healthy separation of church and state in the United States that should continue. However, I think given it's like college. Think of the college system in the United States. You know, I've been a chief academic officer of a university. You can go to a Christian college. I mean, some of the best colleges in the United States, like Notre Dame, are Christian in one way or another colleges. And the government helps support those schools indirectly through help with tuition to the individual student. And so I personally think it would be interesting for states to do like my home state of West Virginia and begin to give vouchers to individual families and students to use as they wish, you know, on schools, on real schools for their children. And this kind of indirect aid, which a religious school like Biola University, where I started the Torrey Honors College, or Houston Baptist University, listen to the name, Houston Baptist University, had an Orthodox chief academic officer who can know. But, you know, secular kids were able to come there, Baptist kids were able to come there, and they were given government aid to the student, not to the institution. And I think a system like that could work. But that's politics, and I'm not waiting around for the government to solve my problems, that's for sure. I will say this, though. The state of West Virginia has actually begun to innovate in this direction, and I know some other states have done so. So it's also not an idle fantasy. You know, other states, I don't know, maybe Michigan could look into this sort of thing. This is a kind of super voucher program, if you will. In the meantime, we need to build Orthodox schools.
Of course. Yeah.
Well, that's my my second question to you, Dr. Reynolds, about how can we encourage the church to spread the Orthodox schools or support them. I mean Orthodox Church not in the United States only. I'm talking about Orthodox Church in general everywhere in the world. Because I will go to the a little bit, allow me just to mention something about the political issue that I hate to say, but you don't want to talk about, or you don't like to talk about. Now, if the states claim, which is falsely claim, of course, that they believe in free, and freedom in religion, freedom in everything. But if you look at the real life in the United States, at least, if you look at the life of colleges, universities, educational institutions, including schools, you don't see that freedom much. You see that you are not allowed to talk about your opinions, about your express your faith, your religion, etc. in all aspects. You are a little bit conservative because you don't want to bother this or to bother that, and so we understand all that. So in other words, if the church is the school, like Orthodox school, is reluctant to get any financial aid from the government because the government will demand certain things from that church or from that school, they have to find another way to make that church support spreading the Orthodox schools, because in my opinion this is extremely important. Educational Orthodox educational schools, very, very important, especially, and it is today is more important than 50 years ago, more important than 100 years ago, because with time, with advancing time, the secular schools are getting against religion, are getting against spiritualism, are getting against church in general, and against Orthodox faith in general. So that's why we have to make, at least try to make a balance, if not like complete balance. So how would you see what we can do to make more Orthodox churches, schools appeared everywhere in the United States, overseas, in Europe? What do you think?
Well, I think the important thing is to look to our roots, and the Orthodox need to remember that we have lived in many kinds of situations where we couldn't count on people, particularly the government, to take care of us, because the government was hostile to us, hostile to our values, overtly so. And I don't have to name names, but we're a church of many martyrs, and we're a church that has faced difficult situations. And Orthodox business leaders in particular, people who start businesses, need to decide whether they want to put their name on a fancy building at a university or a K through 12 that hates their values, that hates their church, that hates their heritage, or they want to contribute to Orthodox education. The Orthodox, we need to begin to take care of our own and take care of our own people. And that's going to come down to not so much the parishes. It's not like the parishes have piles of cash sitting over in a corner, but we, the faithful, are able to take care of ourselves, to take care of our own people. We don't even do as well in some ways as small sects of Protestants do, who have entire K through university systems that they've built by sacrificial giving. And we are, compared to some of those communities, much better off. But I will say a very strong thing, a very strong thing, and I mean it with all my heart. There is an evil moral colonialism that is being spread from a secular society in the west of the world, particularly Western Europe and North America, that will not tolerate Christian values. And this moral colonialism is every bit as pernicious, if not worse, than political colonialism. It is like Marxism, antithetical to the Christian faith, and we need to realize that we can't get along with it. That in the end, there is no compromise that the Christian church can make to get along with this moral colonialism. They are not content that the rest of the world doesn't share their values. They want to appropriate or export their values to the rest of the world. And they'll use every governmental, every non governmental organizational pressure to try to bring every community all over the world in line. And so, American Orthodox people in the homelands, in all over the world, need to realize that there is a great heritage, a great alternative view of reality that is deeper, truer, better, that is able to produce strong families and has a future that can be totally destroyed if we allow ourselves to be colonized by these antithetical secular Christian visions. Now, in the United States, this is sometimes hard to see in a local school. So your kid is going to sixth grade, and unless it's particular topics, it is easy not to see what's going on. But at the highest university level, you need to stop and ask yourself, how friendly is the world of higher education and the world of education, the educational philosophy establishment that directs these schools to traditional Christian belief, and realize that when the United States catches a cold, sometimes the rest of the world gets pneumonia because we spread these destructive ideas through this series of moral colonial projects in things like entertainment. And so the time has come for the Orthodox faithful, particularly business leaders, to step up and say, we don't want to have built these great churches. We don't want our grandparents to have sacrificed in the United States and other places. We don't want to have preserved Orthodox civilization over against many opponents only to give up because Hollywood and American education decided that our views didn't work. When their views themselves are becoming ever more absurd, nihilistic, and dysfunctional. I would say the best way to measure the success of a culture is if it can have enough to sustain itself and raise those children in healthy ways. And secularism in the West is at this most basic task. So a strong statement, but I think it comes to the importance of education.
I still think that we undervalue the value of the Orthodox schools, and we need to
Yes.
spread the word to support the spreading of the Orthodox schools everywhere. And that is coming from, as you said, churches are not sitting on piles of money or gold, so they need help from the parishioners, and parishioners need education about the value of the schools, and that is very important. They need to protect their children, educate their children in order to protect them, to safeguard them against the secular movement that is getting stronger and stronger with time, and that is very, very important. So we need more schools and stronger schools this day than before. And unfortunately, many countries in the many countries in the Middle East, they did not they are not supporting the school, the church, the Christians schools anymore. Not only this, sometimes they are against, and they are not like supporting them in any way. And even in certain countries, they nationalized the schools and they became under the direct supervision of the government, and that reduced the value and the educational levels of those schools. So the church has to, to put more effort in order to support those schools. Before I finish, I just like to send you to read you a question came from Mr. Anthony Alai. To you, he says, as Orthodox parents, our highest goal is to train our children to experience theosis. How do you believe macroevolutionary philosophy and immorality taught in other schools block children's minds from pursuing growth in God's grace? Probably you answered this question in partially in your talk today.
I really think it comes down to this fundamental question. A very good friend who said that we begin in many ways, not with Genesis chapter 1, but with John chapter 1. And we ask this question: do we begin in the beginning with the Word, with divine intelligence, with mind that can come and show himself to us so that we can see both grace, and God knows we all need grace, and truth? Or do we begin with matter and energy and mindless motion so that meaning and purpose are imposed by us on top of things? You know, if we begin with mind, if we begin with the Word, then the most important thing for us is to know what that word said, but it also gives us confidence that the truth is out there and knowable, that we can find it, that God loves us, and that there is hope. On the other hand, if I am imposing meaning, if I'm creating my own reality, then this will end almost surely, as it always does, first in a kind of moral decadence, where in the book of Judges, everybody does what's right in their own eyes. How do I want to live? How do I create my own being? Who do I think I am? And that will work a little bit online. I can create an avatar in a computer game that makes myself look like anything. I can be a young man again. I can take 20 years off my age. But that's not real. That's not the real world. And so the Christian faith begins with the deeper question: in the beginning was the Word. And if we look and see what that word says about us, says about civilization, and has taught us through the church, then we will have a rock, an unchanging moral rock, that will help us weather the storms of our own failures and the failures of the culture all around us. But we really need to stop. We all need to pause as Orthodox Christians and say, have we weathered centuries of persecution of different kinds, from other ideologies and from other religions, only to sell out in the end for the bowl of pottage that's coming to us from secular society, from Hollywood, from the American educational establishment that's hostile to our values and that really doesn't like us anyway, that doesn't want us, will sell our birthright for this pottage, and then I promise you they won't even give us the soup. They won't even let us eat. And so the time has come for us, the laity. The priests are not opposed to this. The bishops are not opposed to this. The metropolitans and the patriarchs, thanks be to God, aren't opposed to this. So if the laity rise up and we provide the resources and we want education that's done from an Orthodox perspective, then this Orthodox moment can show us serving our nation, the nations of the world, and helping produce a new generation for the church.
Yes. So,
Doctor,
Dr.
your voice.
Adnan.
Your mic.
Okay, sorry. I would like to ask a question, not for today's session, for next session, and this will be also a promise from you to be with us at least a second time.
It would be an honor. It would be an honor.
It is honor to us, Dr. Reynolds.
I have a face made for radio, I'm afraid, but I will I will keep doing what I can.
So so this is question again for next session, because time is running. We are running out of time, and I don't want you to give me a gated answer. Since as a PhD holder of philosophy, I would like you next time to tell us how the differences between Orthodox and non-Orthodox in perceiving secular knowledge, assimilating secular knowledge, and expressing secular knowledge. For example, if you have an Orthodox believer and non-Orthodox believer studying science or philosophy, how does their faith or lack of faith affect their receiving of their knowledge, and how it makes a difference in their assimilation, in metabolizing the information and interacting this information with their faith, and what is the difference between both of them in expressing this to the outside world. In other words, does the Orthodox teaching make a difference in understanding cosmology, understanding philosophy, understanding natural sciences to the believers versus the non-believers in their life? So I don't know if I express myself very good
No,
or not, or good
that's a
enough.
great question, and I look forward to even attempting in a small way to answer it. Can I tell you a small story? Do we have time for a short
Oh
story?
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I will tell you a big difference for an Orthodox believer, and that is that we look to the wisdom of the grandmothers, because we know that God can reveal things to them. And I will tell you that I was in grad school and I was working on a very difficult logic final, mathematical logic final. And logic is a subject. The exam was so difficult that they could just give you the exam and send you home to work on it. And you worked on the problems and worked on the problems. And if you got 16% of the problem right, you could get an A. But I was stuck. I was not sure what to do. And so I went to church, and I was getting ready to sing in the choir. And I talked too much by nature, as you might notice, but I was very quiet that night. And so an older grandmother in the church turned and said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Oh, I'm having trouble at school, at the university, understanding something." And she said, "Can I pray for you?" And my first thought was a thought of arrogance, for which I am very deeply sorry. Like, how could you even understand this problem? I can't understand this problem I'm working on. And then I realized immediately what a fool I was. Because of the church, because of the truth of the church, I realized that there is a wisdom that goes beyond wisdom. And I can only tell you this. This would not be a proof to an atheist. I wouldn't try to use it that way. But I'm talking to you. She prayed for me, and I immediately knew how to solve the problem. And I had done the work. It isn't that I had been lazy. I wasn't expecting God to do the work for me. But the Spirit came and took what I had done and made it more than what I could have done through the wisdom and the spiritual blessing of the prayers of this Nana, this grandmother, this older woman. And it is the knowledge that that is possible, and that there is wisdom even and power, even in the simplest person in the church when I go, that I think is very different. It's a very different approach when you're doing a PhD in philosophy at a secular university, to realize the grandmother next to you in choir may have better help for your logic problem than the smart person you go to class with. So it's a small story, and there's a longer answer, but that's a little bit of it. It's real. That was a real thing, and it was a beautiful thing. It was a beautiful experience.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think this
Any
is
more questions?
a good thing to the end, and I hope like the church to be involved, like Dr. Adnan says, because this is very important for our kids, for the future of our kids, for the future of the church, because the young kids are the future of the church. They will be on the
Amen.
church, and they will come into the church. So if you have a good Orthodox teaching everywhere, that at least will prevent these kids to go outside, to go on the world, and to maybe lost on the world, and to stay inside the church and to stay inside the faith that they were grown, and they will be a good future for our church. So I hope this will be more big, and discussion more big with the church leaders and everywhere. So there will be a big support on this program, and to have a school on every city, like
Michigan.
like
Well, Michigan.
Mr. Elias says here, we need a school in every city and every state. So I'm with him saying, yeah, we need a school in every state and every city, so we will spread the Orthodox faith for everyone, and even the people come from outside, they will learn and be part of the church. That's the goal
Yes.
of
Yes.
our life, you know. So
Yes.
thank you, Dr. John. Thank you for your time, and we wish we'll see you soon with the topic that Dr. Adnan opened, which is very, very important, how we can look at the science and education in a faith look, like when we have a faith, how we can understand these things. And we discuss on this like all the times with Dr. Adnan, with Karam, all the time we talk about this. So it's good to
Yeah, I can't
move
wait.
this to the people. It's a very important subject and it's a very important topic to discuss too.
Maybe you will tell me too. I'm always learning. The
No.
nice thing about being a philosopher is we know we don't know anything, so we have to learn.
Every day we learn.
That's the
learning.
beginning of knowledge.
Yeah.
That's
Yes,
the beginning of
that's
knowledge.
That's exactly right.
Great, great.
You know, Dr. Reynolds, we used to say a joke in medicine about the definition of subspecialty in medicine is to know more and more about less and less until you know everything about nothing.
Yeah, that is my dissertation.
So,
Any
you know-
dissertation is like that. Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Reynolds. Hopefully,
you.
next time won't be very long time, and also we will have, if somebody a graduate to join us with you from St. Constantine
Yes, that would be
school.
that would be fantastic. That would be fantastic.
Yeah, no,
We'll
we
have
can
somebody
arrange
at least
it.
call in. Yes,
So-
thank you.
So, Doctor, what
Karam,
we'll have
late?
on next Sunday? What we'll have on Sunday?
What we will have Sunday? Okay, Sunday we will have in Arabic a combined session to talk about why the youth, especially the youth, avoid going to the Orthodox churches, and this will be with the Sarkhat Nubuwa group from northern Lebanon, Syria, and also from England. So it will be a joint presentation between us and them. Hopefully, we will present some of the issues and problems and obstacles, and some of the suggested solutions to this issue.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, and we wish we'll see you on next Sunday at 3 p.m. on Michigan time, and 9 p.m. on I think Syria, Jordan, and Lebanon time, and we wish to see you then. Thank you.